Hello, welcome to week 6, Disciples Fore-Mothers, in our course on Disciples' History and Polity. When I started thinking about some help, and I at first asked a colleague to help me out, but it just didn't work out to do a lecture like we did last week with Shonda Job. So instead, I wrote to several disciples, women, pastors, clergy, um, and asked them what they might impart to you if they were given the opportunity to do a lecture. And so many of them, several of them, really wanted me to make sure you realized just how difficult it still is for women clergy in the disciples. Um, One wrote that we have the freedom and encouragement to be educated, but our congregation's willing to call a woman to the pastorate. Um, and wondered if women are called to the parish, what obstacles do they face? Some, she said, are within the congregation, and some are with outside the congregation. Um, Another wanted me to uh, point out the history that has often left women to the side or negated or lessened their role in the history of our denomination. However, the thing that I really want to focus on for this lecture uh, came from our regional minister um, for congregational care and women's ministries, Paula Pashaha. And I'd like to read some of what she wrote about women's history, about one particular instance. The disciples would have faded from strong missionary work in the 1870s, Paula writes, after the American Christian Missionary Society of the Church could no longer sustain most of its overseas missions. A woman by the name of Caroline Neville Perry, and you can read about her in the Deborah Hall book on pages 131, I believe it is. I'm sorry, 118. Um, was moved to do something about it and felt called to organize women to help in 1874. She wrote letters to prominent men and women of many congregations, and 6 months later, these women formed the official structure of the Christian Women's Board of Missions. Following the example of other denominations a little quicker than the DOC to utilize women's strengths and gifts for mission, although CWBM, the Christian Women's Board of Missions, was unique from these others in that it was entirely organized and managed by women. 15 months later, they had raised enough money to send a missionary and his family to Jamaica to renew the work that had to be abandoned years before as the ACMS lost solvency and couldn't sustain it. It was the women's organization from then on that funded and organized most of the missions ministries until 1919. However, there were other various missionary organizations of the church, and the women felt strongly that they should merge into one to avoid duplication and strengthen mission work. They were fundamental in proposing the United Christian Missionary Society. Unfortunately, though, the CWBM brought the most leadership and assets and even managed the College of Missions, which is the first graduate level training for missionaries, women lost their autonomy and were not given high leadership in the new United Co-ed organization. In 1949, the focus for women expanded to organize to strengthen the leadership of women in the local congregation. This led to the formation of the Christian Women's Fellowship, whose main purpose was to train women to become visible leaders. They still also focused on mission and service, but now through this organization, once again, led and managed by women. Most of these groups had their own money and gave offerings to the wider church and mission above whatever congregational giving was done. In the 1970s, with the growth of feminism and women's liberation, a parallel movement to CWF formed in many regions. For the Christian Church of Northern California and Nevada, Doris McCullough was prominent in this group, known as the Women's Commission, which added political advocacy for equality and women's rights. The Women's Commission was a parallel organization in the region to the CWF cabinet, having its own annual retreat. This branch has since renamed Women's Spirit and continues to be the stronger feminist voice in women's ministries, but working now as part of the larger regional Women's Ministries Coordinating Council. In the early 2000s, many regions began to shift from the organizational CWF structure to include all ministries done by and for women in any congregation. Since women now have many opportunities for leader development, the original purpose and focus of CWF has been fulfilled. Now Women's Ministries tries to focus on relationship building among women, women's spirituality, and continues to emphasize the importance of mission and service. We also do include an ongoing leader development for all areas of women's life. In 2007, International CWF changed their name to International Disciples Women's Ministries, again acknowledging the growth beyond formal CWF structure to include reaching all women wherever they are on their path. I so appreciate those words from Paula and hope that you will take them in also and give them some thought. Some of the things I wanted to raise were the things that are going on right now um, with women's ministries. I believe Paula briefly mentioned, no, I didn't get to that part, about women to women worldwide trips that are sponsored by the Office of Disciples Women. And it sends a group of women from the United States and Canada to meet with women of other countries. Recently, trips have gone to Turkey, Colombia, Israel, Palestine, Croatia, and I've known several of the women who have gone on these trips and come back and speak in regional meetings and congregations about their experiences um, with with their experiences on these trips. Also, there's the Women's Action Web, um, which is a local uh, version of the women to women trips, where women tour and see what is being done in various areas of this country. Um, Also, I would be remiss if I didn't note that uh, the Disciples of Christ was the first mainline denomination to call a woman as its general minister and president, as its head. Sharon Watkins was called to be our general minister and president and has served in that office for the past 6 years, excuse me, and continues to do so with much support and grateful prayers of many around her, men and women alike. I hope that as you study this week, you will remember the gifts of women that often are forgotten or the gifts that go unreported. For history often leaves out the uh, stories that don't get told. Thank you, and I'll see you in the forums.